2024 is about to begin. We kindly ask all attendees to enter the conference hall and take their designated seats. Thank you for your attention. Good morning, distinguished guests, keynote speakers, and participants. The third annual conference of Faculty of Education 2024 is about to begin. We kindly ask all attendees to enter the conference hall and take their designated seats. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate if all electronic devices and communication devices are turned off or set to the silent mode. As a kind of reminder, taking pictures with your personal cameras is only permitted after the ceremony, and please remain in the conference hall during the ceremony. Thank you for your cooperation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to extend an honorary welcome to Professor Dr. Jamhari, Rector of Universitas Islam International Indonesia. Dr. Andes M. Rifki Muna MDiv2 PhD, Academic Senate Chairman. Bahrul Hayat PhD, Vice Rector for Academic Human Resources and Student Affairs. Dr. Phil Shafiq Hashim MA, Vice Rector for Research, Cooperation, and Community Engagement. Professor Dr. Amsal Bahtiar, Vice Rector for Planning, Finance, and Business Development. Professor Nina Nurmila, PhD, the Dean of Faculty of Education. Muhammad Yazid Elsi, the Head of International Office and Students Affairs. Professor Lin St. Oates from the University of Melbourne, as well as all professors, lecturers, students, keynote speakers, and conference participants.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the third Faculty of Education 2024 Annual Conference at Universitas Islam International Indonesia.
The third Faculty of Education 2024 Annual Conference is a cherished tradition held each year by the Faculty of Education to celebrate the advancement of knowledge, foster academic collaboration, and highlight the innovative contributions of educators and researchers in the education community. This year's annual conference will focus on the theme, a new way of teaching and learning, integrating well-being in educational settings.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Furqanul Hakim, and joining me today, Ms. Faradila Haryani, the PhD students from Faculty of Education, Batch 2. It's an honor for us to be here in the dignified and special event, the high points of the academic year. Today's program will consist of the opening ceremony, remarks, prayers, cultural performance, and keynote speakers session 1.
Dear respected audiences, the first agenda is to sing Indonesia's national anthem and Universitas Islam International Indonesia March. All audiences are kindly requested to stand.
Di sanalah aku berdiri.
are welcome to sit back.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, the welcoming speech from the Dean of Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam International, Indonesia. Please welcome Professor Nina Nurmila, PhD, to deliver her speech.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable our Rector, Professor Dr. Jamhari, congratulations for your day of inauguration today, for being elected to be our Rector. Distinguished keynote speakers, we have Professor Lindy C. Awad from University of Melbourne, and the Vice Rectors, and all the presenters, staff, committees, participants of the conference. Alhamdulillah, we can finally meet in our third annual education conference with the topic of a new way of teaching and learning, integrating well-being in educational settings. I'm very grateful for the coming of Dr. Bahrul Hayat, Professor Amsar Bahtiar, Dr. Shafiq Hasim, our head of the Senate, Dr. Rifki Muna, and of course our rector. Yeah. So for those of you who are new to this campus, this is newly established campus, and our rector was one of the founders of this university. And we only started in September 2021 with the opening of MA in Education. And in 2023, we have so the third batch. So up until now, we have 3 batches. And the first batch, 20 MA students have already graduated. And I see some of you are here, like Dian, Poppy. Well, I cannot see the faces. Okay, you raise your hands. Sorry if I don't mention your name one by one. And both MA and PhD programs have 4 concentration. First, curriculum teaching and learning. Second, educational assessment and evaluation. Third, education policy management and leadership. And the fourth is education and society. So our first conference in 2022 started under the theme education and society. And then in 2023, our second international conference was under the theme education policy management and leadership. And this year we have a conference under the theme of curriculum teaching and learning. And inshallah next year we will have the 4th annual conference under the theme educational assessment and evaluation, which will be held on the 28th until the 29th of May. So the aim of the conference is to facilitate both junior and senior scholars to present their research finding and to build networks with each other for further research and publication collaborations. In addition, that our conference also aims to pull the paper to be published in our journal, Muslim Education Review. So we have published 4 editions, and if you need to take the copies of our published journals, please you can go to the staff in the front to take some of the publications for your library, and you can contact our staff, yeah, in the front. And of course, as newly established journal, we need your support, like from the keynote speaker, Professor Lindsay also have already told us that he's working on the paper to be published in our journal, just like Professor Bob Hefner did it after his being keynote speaker in the first conference. So in terms of the number of papers submitted to our conference committee, there has been increasing number of papers submitted to our conference. We began from accepting 13 papers only, and we selected 6 papers in 2022. Then this increased in 2023 into 19 papers, and we selected 15 papers. And this year, it increased dramatically into 46 papers, and we selected 26 papers. But this is still lower number in compared to 75 papers accepted for the writing competition. Maybe because the title is writing competition, people have already known that they will get reward. Yeah. So based on that, we beginning 2023, we motivated our conference participants by offering the best paper for the conference, and we will announce this best paper during the dinner time, and you will know that at 3:30 p.m. we will have photo booth, so please take your pictures there, and we will have dinner afterward after the announcement of the winners for the best paper of this conference. Finally, I would like to thank our rectors, vice rectors, deans, head of units, head of the study programs, lectures, I saw public studies also, committees, students, our staffs, and all participants of this conference. I hope you can gain best experiences by attending this conference. Please take as many photos as possible for those of you who are new to this campus and publish it in your social media. We are glad that after our outreach, we have, for example, a student who participate in the conference and then applied to study here. One of them is, I remember Lukiana was the participant, one of the participants of the conference in 2023, and she applied for PhD, and then she will be our student next year. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Nagula PhD, the Dean of Faculty of Education, Islam International Indonesia.
The next agenda is the welcoming remarks from the Rector of Universitas Islam International Indonesia. We would like to invite the Rector of UIII, Professor Dr. Jamhari, to deliver the welcoming remarks. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'inu ala umuri dunya waddin. Assalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'du. First of all, it is my pleasure to be with you here, distinguished guests and also friends and colleagues, Pak Rifki, Pak Bahrul, Pak Amsal, Pak Syafiq, and also Professor Nina, and especially Professor Lindsay Oates from the University of Melbourne, coming along way to our university. Thank you for your coming. Distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, committee members, my beloved students, ladies and gentlemen, I stand here before you today to welcome you to the 3rd International Conference of the Faculty of Education of Universitas Islam International Indonesia. Your attendance at this conference is truly appreciated, and it acts as testament to your commitment to advancing education in Indonesia and around the globe. It has been 3 years since the first cohort of our students at IIIU. In these 3 years, we proceeded on developing the campus to a great hub of learning, promoting the moderate values of Indonesian Islam, and a place to embrace modernity. Our preference will not gain in vain. We progress with increasing study programs across the faculties, with 11 programs currently available for future scholars to choose from. We can continue to thrive together with the 4 faculty of IIIU, Faculty of Education, Faculty of Islamic Studies, Faculty of Social Sciences, and the Faculty of Economic and Business. And we are very happy for this year. we received 3,600 applicants, and we can only accept 250. So almost 1 by 10. So congratulations for you, also the deans and also other faculty members. And those 3,600 applicants coming from 78 countries. So there are some new countries from Europe, from America, and from Japan. So we are very happy that this education. And Budekan, I hope that the theme for the next year, touching a very sensitive and also important issues on the finance of education that currently a lot of people debating in Indonesia and also in the world. How to finance our education? Is it through public fund or through government? I think if Faculty of Education can do such a research on the financial aspect of education and become a theme for the next year, that will be a really contribution to our education and also internationally. This approach recognizes the importance of addressing students' emotional intelligence, psychologically and physically well-being throughout their academic development. We will be informed about the principles such as holistic development, social and emotional learning, and positive relationships. In addition, implementation strategies must be explored, challenges to overcome, and benefits to be repeated. As we embark on this conference journey, let us remember that our reflection isn't just about our past and present. It invites us to join a vibrant community where knowledge, culture, and progress converge. Let us shape a future grounded in our shared values of a better world together. I am humbled to lead this university, nurturing higher education, building a better world. Thank you, and may blessing of Isa of all to us. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Jamhari, for the welcoming remark.
Ladies and gentlemen, next I would like to invite the representative from the organizing committee, Associate Professor Charina Ayu Rizkianti, PhD, to deliver the report speech. The floor is yours.
for this. Thank you so much, Rakim. Thank you. Tes. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable our rector, distinguished keynote speakers, the esteemed scholars, presenters, staff, committees, and not to mention the alumni of Batch 1 MA. Thank you so much for coming here. We extend our cordial welcome to all the attendees of the Third International Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. It is our pleasure to have you with us here today. Dear all participants, understanding well-being is not solely about acquiring knowledge. It is equally important to apply it in our daily lives, especially on campus environment. IIIU, or Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, is a postgraduate university with highly intellectual individuals. In terms of age range, from the developmental theory, we all here are in the adult phase, from the early until late adulthood. And during this phase, it is essential to offer the best of ourselves to others as a way of serving God. Inevitably, the increasing focus on well-being, particularly on mental health, in the education sectors, increasing and occurs for a crucial reason. Educational institutions must adopt a holistic approach to teaching and learning and integrate well-being into their policies and practices. Therefore, our theme for the Third International Conference is a new way of teaching and learning, integrating well-being in the educational settings. And one of the noble missions of the Faculty of Education at IIIU is to create an inclusive campus environment that supports well-being. Although this mission might seem straightforward, it requires a serious commitment to achieve it. In a similar vein, the glorious purpose of IIIU formation is to introduce peaceful moderate Islam. And to achieve this purpose must begin with building the basic character of human resources, which is immensely related to the foundation of well-being. Empowering others to feel good about themselves, regardless of their background, race, gender, religion, and other identities, is a starting point for promoting well-being. Everyone deserves to feel valued and appreciated. Whether it's a simple compliment or kind gesture, the impact it can have someone's day is immeasurable. That's how well-being begins. Now, let us ask ourselves, have we done that? Let us all be reminded to prioritize each other's well-being. We must understand that just because we are fortunate enough to have everything we need, it doesn't necessarily mean that we receive anything in return. Rather, we can always give something away. Dear all participants, we are sincerely hopeful that our Third International Conference will serve as an exceptional platform for fostering meaningful dialogue and exchanging innovative ideas. We believe that this event will inspire and engage to those who dedicated to learning and creating. In anticipation of your enthusiastic involvement and productive discussion, again, we extend our heartfelt appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the informative speech from the coordinators of the events.
Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure the success of this event, we will now proceed to the next agenda, the prayers. This will be delivered by Insof Wajib from Thailand and Muhammad Lutfi from Central Java, Indonesia, both MA students from the Faculty of Education's Batch 3. Insof and Lutfi, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, let us bow our head for a moment. Pray to God Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala so that our annual conference can be precious to all of us. We will lead this prayer based on the teaching of Islam, and those who are not Muslims, you are pleased to pray according to your beliefs. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. اللهم اجعل هذا المؤتمر الدولي بمثابة تجمع علما مفيدا ووسيلة لتبادل الأفكار والمعارف والخيرات المفيدة للعلماء والباحثين والطلاب في مختلف التخصصات. أتمنى أن يفيد المؤتمر الذي نناظمه اليوم حياتنا ويواسع معارفنا ويضيء أفكارنا ويقودنا إلى أن أكون أشخاصا منتجين ناجحين، مما يؤدي بدورة إلى تعزيز كرامة أماتنا. اللهم ارشد قلوبنا وعقولنا وباركها بنور هداك، وامنحنا حكمتك العليا في أعمالنا، وساعدنا على تعبير عن أفكارنا بوضوح، وساعدنا على الاستماع لبعضنا البعض واحترام بعضنا البعض وحب بعضنا البعض حتى أننا ننضم إلى الأشخاص المباركين. اللهم احفظنا من الفتن غير المقصودة، واهدنا الطريق الصحيح، وارزقنا العلم والقوة لفعل خيرات، وأرنا السيئات وبينها، وارزقنا العلم والقوة لتجانبها.
O Allah, make this international conference as a useful science assembly, as a medium of sharing useful ideas, knowledge, and experiences of scholars, researchers, and students of various disciplines. May the conference we organize today benefit to our lives, broaden our knowledge, shine our ideas, and lead us to be successful, productive persons, which in turn will boost dignity of our nation. O Allah, guide and bless our heart and our minds with the light of your guidance. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities. Help us to speak our minds clearly. Help us to listen to each other, respect each other, love each other, so that we are included to the blessed person. O Allah, protect us from unintended temptation. Show us the right path and give us knowledge and strength to perform good things equally. Show us and make it clear the bad things and give us knowledge and strength to avoid them.
ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Insaf and Muhammad Lutfi, for the prayers. May Allah answer our prayers. Amen. We would like to invite all VVIP guests to take photo together. Professor Dr. Jamhari, Dr. Andes M. Rifki Muna, Pak Bahrul Hayat PhD, Dr. Phil Shafiq Hashim, Professor Dr. Amsal Bahtiar, Professor Nina Nurmila, Muhammad Yazid LC, and also Professor Lindsay Oates to take photo together in the stage. We would like to also invite the faculty members of Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam International Indonesia to take photo together to the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself. Up next, we have the vibrant and grateful dance performance from Estudia. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you can fill the first and the second row. We invite the audience to come to the first and the second row. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself. Up next, we have the vibrant and grateful dance performance from Estudia.
Estudia is the Faculty of Education Student Association which brings the dynamic voice of the students and serves as the central hub for the students-led initiatives at the Faculty of Education. Through various programs, events, and advocacy efforts, Estudia aims to empower students, encourage leadership, and contribute to the vibrant campus life at the Faculty of Education.
Showcasing the graceful movements of Cik Cik Periuk from Jakarta, the vibrant Sinanggar Tulot from North Sumatra, the Ayo Mama dance from Molucas, the Bandining dance from West Sumatra, and Manuk Dadali from the West Java, ended by a medley instruments. Let's warmly welcome the talented students from the Faculty of Education's Student Associations at Universitas Islam International, Indonesia. Please give them a big round of applause.
Sumbing dari Jawa, datang naik cipu bawa kepiting dua ekor. Jajah budel belang api cak hidung gigi rongga. Sampai ketawa dulu dipacu laju tunggal. Mesat ngepung luhur jauh di awan-awan, lebar kejanjana bangun tayat keringan, suku merah luas tujuh pemantik melulu, dapat dikabari bermatarik melu. Sahabat bisa musuhkan tandangna, gendang cinta tentang payah bandingan mana. Mesat ngepung luhur jauh di awan-awan, lebar kejanjana bangun tayat keringan, suku merah luas rujung pemantik Cukup sauyunan para pahit. Di bermana tak indah kami nyanyikan. Mesat ngapung luhur jauh di awan-awan, meber dapat nikna dan rasa simetria bersatu.
Lari-lari bukannya kijang, pandan tajamu di muaro.
Kami bernyanyi jotari indah, pau be hati urang nanti bo.
Ampun jo maaf oi kami tuhunkan padodun sana ale ala tibo samuila salam oi kami ucapkan kami baindang nan mudo-mudo.
Mudo indah kadi tarikan sangan bajawe onde ganti ganti. Lagulah indah kami nyanyikan supaya sana onde basuh hati.
Hey, indin da indin, oi
isn't something we found for. Never wanted this kind of pain. Telling myself so good and heartless, but one thing you should know.
Once again, please give them a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, the opening ceremony has ended. Now let us explore the academic discussions and innovation with the theme, the new way of teaching and learning integrating well-being in educational setting.
Dear distinguished guests and participants, we are now coming to the main event. The next agenda is the keynote speakers session with our two keynote speakers. The first will be delivered by Professor Lindsay Oates from the University of Melbourne, Australia. The second one, we have the keynote speakers from Kiai Haji Saifur Rahmat Dasuki, MSc, the Vice Minister of Religious Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia.
Dear respected audience, we are now coming to the first keynote speaker, Professor Lindsay Oates from the University of Melbourne, Australia, with the topic, Flourishing and Well-being in Education. And the session will be moderated by the Associate Professor Charina Ayu Rizkianti, PhD, the faculty members of the Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam International, Indonesia.
Please join us in welcoming Professor Lindsay Oates and Associate Professor Charina Ayu Rizkianti, PhD, to the stage.
Good morning, all. Thank you so much still joining us. First of all, I would like to welcome again our next keynote speaker, that is Professor Lindsay Oates from University of Melbourne. Today we are very grateful and blessed to have him with us. Thank you so much, Prof, for your time to be with us here today. So before we start, allow me to introduce our keynote speaker. Professor Lindsay Oates is Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Education and Professor of Wellbeing Science in the University of Melbourne, Australia, with abundance of achievement. He earned his PhD in the University of Wollongong, Australia, and he's an internationally acclaimed as a well-being scientist, researcher, educator, and author. Professor Lindsay's multidisciplinary background, spanning philosophy of science and ethics, clinical, coaching, and positive psychology, business and public policy provide insights into the multidisciplinary area of well-being. He was previously a co-editor for the International Journal of Well-being, a scientific panel member at the Institute of Coaching, Harvard University, and a visiting researcher at King's College London. And Professor Lindsay's current work involves understanding, measuring, and improving well-being literacy, and this is part of his new theory about thrivability theory. Not only productive in conducting research and earning so many research grants, Professor Lindsay also wrote several books about well-being and mental health that I believe those who read his books will be enlightened. And today's topic we will discuss, Professor Lindsay will deliver the topic from well-being education to well-being literacy, which is highly relevant to what our today's generation is likely to prioritize. Professor Lindsay, we are looking forward to learn from you. Without further ado, the time is yours.
Better. Good morning. Can you hear me up the back okay? Yeah. Firstly, I want to say it's a great honour to be here. And if I had the right words, I would also recognize...
Text.
Okay, let's keep going.
Check started.
Jess, go. Yes. Okay, so if I had the right words, I would recognise Islam and pay my respects, but I will ask you after and I will learn the right words. But I come here with great respect and very excited to be in Indonesia for the first time. And this is the first university that I have presented at. And I'm also told that the Indonesian people are the friendliest and kindest in the world. And I was literally told that 2 days ago. And I want to thank Professor Nina for her wonderful welcome last night. So I'm sincerely and truly honoured to be here. But also the topic is particularly interesting to me. How can we integrate education and well-being? And this is particularly important to me because what we're seeing around the world is society struggling with mental health issues and health systems won't solve that issue. I strongly believe a large part of the solution will come through education. And I don't just mean more work for teachers in schools, I mean education in general. I also take a position where I see mental health and well-being as different things, and I think, and that is one of the reasons I have focused so much on well-being related language, because we need to understand more specifically and more scientifically what we are trying to achieve. And what I will talk about today, in the time I have, I will keep talking until Professor Nina pulls me off, because I can talk about this stuff for a long time. I'm going to make a few comments to begin with about a paper we've just published, which is a consensus definition of well-being education, which of course makes us think very carefully about when we say well-being, and I have to be careful with my pronunciation, because with my Australian pronunciation, often people, when I say well-being, they think I'm saying world bank. good life, living a good ethical life, and a process of realizing your potential, ethically and otherwise. The idea of the overall process of realizing your potential and experiencing well-being while you're doing it. In an educational context, that could mean academic achievement, ethical goodness, and feeling good while you're doing it. That overall concept of human flourishing sits above a lot of the more specific areas. The key idea here is that that is an appropriate overall aim of education. So we've been working with UNESCO in terms of looking for how do we define and what's the role of education. And so in our recent work with UNESCO, flourishing has been defined as the aim of education. So that is very important, because if you think about that, it isn't just that you have a well-being program or a flourishing program or a particular intervention. The actual aim of education, be it in a school or be it in a university, according to this approach, is human flourishing or flourishing. So a lot of people will think about well-being and they'll think about interventions and they'll think about things you can do, specific things in the classroom. But the overall idea is the whole reason this university exists, according to UNESCO, would be human flourishing. So we're actually all in this endeavour of flourishing. So we must, should, and can integrate that with our learning, but the actual aim of what we're doing is flourishing. It's not just a nice to have. And that is different than some big organisations like the OECD, which is a more economic organisation, which will say the role of education or the aim of education is to develop human capital, which of course is an economic term. So we want to teach people and educate people so we can grow our economy. That's an okay idea, but it doesn't include ethics. And so one of the big reasons that I prefer to think about flourishing is that it includes ethics. Ethics broadly, so that in this context, that could mean some of the core ethical tenets of Islam. In a different context, I literally just came from the Vatican and spoke with the Roman Catholics. In that context, it will be the ethics that relate to the Roman Catholic tradition. However, there are when you actually get down to some of the core ethics, there are some big commonalities. And so in some ways, the flourishing conversation enables us to think about education across multiple contexts internationally. You will see big differences, of course, by context, but this is one of the reasons I encourage you to think about human flourishing while we also start to think more specifically about what to do in education and education classrooms, lecture theatres, school communities, university communities, workplaces, families, relationships. It is everywhere, and it's not only well-being in an educational context. So I wanted to start with that idea. A lot of people don't understand when they hear the word well-being or they hear the word flourishing, they don't understand how big or ubiquitous, how this thing is everywhere. It's not a nice little thing added to a curriculum. It is everywhere. And in secular traditions, so non-religious contexts, it's probably replacing the idea of things like God. And I know that is a big statement, but in secular places, like Australia now, which is only 49% people identify with religion, in parts of the US, in parts of places where there isn't a clear guiding well-being, flourishing, these ideas being used as a way of helping people think about how they should live. In a context like this, you don't need to have that because you already have a great wisdom tradition of Islam to assist, guide those principles. But what I'm recommending you to think about is have a look at human flourishing and well-being and think about it in those regards. Don't just think about them in psychological, educational, or economic ways. So with that introduction, the consensus, I'll come and talk to some people over here. The consensus model that we're working with is really looking at what's the context of the education. No, it's not working. On the screen. There we go. What's the context of the actual educational environments you're developing? What's the learning? So a lot of people will focus in the middle. If you're an educator, you're probably focusing in the middle, looking at working with the student, looking at their values, their interests. And where we say values, it might be their values, but often it'll be the values of Islam or the bigger wisdom traditions that will be drawn from. And then finally, the flourishing is really the interaction between what they've learned and the broader environment. And when we say environment, they've got their immediate classroom environment. You've got, the rector was talking about the university as a whole. You've got your city. You've got the whole set of systems. All of these things will impact on well-being and flourishing. Working out what your role in the education system is and how that intersects with these broader well-being traditions, that is the challenge. There are a lot of people who will tell you what you should be teaching, how you should be teaching. A lot of people, your friends, your colleagues, students, the government, the Islam tradition. There are a lot of people who will be telling you what you should do. One of the important aspects of this is to think about how does this, if we're going to integrate well-being into the education setting, we need models and ideas. And as I will argue, if we're going to do well-being education, if we're going to do some of the larger things that I just talked about to integrate the way we think about well-being in education systems, we need to be literate. That is, we need a language and we need to know how to use that language. One of the things we're seeing in Australia a lot is people confusing mental health, which really means mental illness. So things like people experiencing anxiety and depression, commonly, like up to 20% around that of clinical levels of anxiety and depression, which we're seeing in many nations. And then the narrative kind of goes, okay, we're having lots of people experiencing anxiety and depression, therefore we need to prevent that, therefore we need to bring in a medical way of thinking about it. And there's a lot of work being done on anxiety prevention, depression prevention, suicide prevention. All of that is very important and necessary, but I would argue that that is mental health. Well-being, and as I'll talk about related to that, flourishing, is a different thing. It's a broader thing. It's overall. It's not only the mental health functioning of the individual, it's the overall experience, which includes education, economics. It includes multiple factors. And it's not relevant only to 20%. It is relevant to 100% of people. And therefore, I also argue that it is more the role of education than it is the role of a health system. Well-being lives in education. It is learnable, teachable, doable. Mental health and those issues, from a government perspective, yeah, let the health services take the front run on that. Everyone, well-being is relevant to everyone, and therefore, particularly school education. Most people have to go to school. It's one of the largest, should I say, captured sections of the population. Most people must go to school. So in terms of population well-being, education is our largest lever. It's our largest opportunity. And if flourishing is the aim of education, then well-being should be not only at the centre of curriculum, but also at the centre of pedagogy and at the centre of assessment. But this takes a huge rethink because we see so many nations that are so interested in academic achievement that they think well-being is an interruption. It's getting in the way of people achieving academic achievement. However, if we change all of those things, if we change the curriculum, if we change the pedagogy, or I shouldn't say change, if we improve the curriculum, improve the pedagogy, and improve the way we assess, always with well-being and flourishing in mind, academic achievement is still there. Human flourishing is realising the process of realising your potential and experiencing well-being while you're doing it. It's not either or, and we have to design systems where high performance and high functioning and experience of well-being all work together. And that is why some of the definitions about flourishing I started with are so important, because it's not, is it academic achievement or is it well-being? It is both. And our challenge is to not just design curriculum and pedagogy, but communities, systems, and I literally came from work 2 days ago on our architecture. How do we build buildings that are enhancing our well-being? How do we build them where we're interacting with nature? You have a lot of opportunities in this type of environment. So it's a guiding principle that impacts everything that we think about, but the education piece is how can we learn and to do it better. So on that note, I've talked a little bit about flourishing and well-being and what is well-being education. If we're going to have well-being education, if we're going to inculcate well-being and flourishing into all that we do, we need a literacy and a way of talking and using language about that. So we have developed a concept called wellbeing literacy. Could someone please pronounce, Nina, I'm going to ask you to pronounce wellbeing literacy in your language to make sure everyone is getting this correctly.
Okay, well-being literasi itu in Indonesian language is literasi kesejahteraan. Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't able to do that. I can see it written, but I wouldn't say it correctly. So, wellbeing literacy, firstly thinking of it as a capability. So it's not just a one-off thing, it's a capability. The ability to do this, the ability to comprehend and compose wellbeing language. So comprehend, which is like receptive language use. Compose is the more expressive part of language use. Across context, so we're not just doing it at a school or a university. We're doing it across multiple contexts. And here's the really important part: with the intention. This is where the ethical component, how we use language to maintain or improve the well-being of oneself or others, and in some ways we can consider it to include the world, which starts to pick up some of the aspects of environmental sustainability. We haven't done that work yet. Someone else will probably do it, but we're focused on how we use language intentionally to improve the well-being of self or others. Put simply, how we communicate about and for well-being. So I'm going to ask you an important question. This will be my only audience participation at this. Who enjoyed the dancing that we just saw? Who enjoyed seeing the dances? Okay, so it's coming. There's more and more. Yeah. Okay, so that was an example of intentionally communicating something for the well-being of others. You might think you might hear the word literacy and think words, that sort of vocal language. But if we think in a multimodal communication, they created something for you to view. And everyone was smiling. Everyone. I looked up. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was enjoying. There was an intentional creation of something for someone else to view. So that is one example of one type of wellbeing literacy. That actual the dancing we saw was wellbeing enhancing. They were capable of dancing, and I hear that some people were volunteers and some people were experienced dancers, but they were capable of doing that, and it was done intentionally. It didn't happen by accident. So that would be one example of a practice of wellbeing literacy in one particular mode of communication. So now we'll get, I'll unpack that a little more in a little more technical way. The capability model of wellbeing literacy. When I say capability, I'm using it in a way, put simply, what we're able to be and do. So what are we able to do with language in the way we use it, and how does that relate to wellbeing? You might ask, why so much emphasis on language? One of the key reasons put a lot of emphasis on language, like many things psychological, they live in language. They're largely metaphorical because so many of these things are non-physical. So we use metaphors to make sense of the non-physical. For those of you with a background in psychology, I'll give an example. If you look at some of the big psychological theories, Freud's work, it's based on the metaphor of a steam engine, repression and things being released. A lot of the work of cognitive psychology is based on the metaphor of the mind, the brain as a computer, processing speeds, etc. So that we create these realities through particular use of language. And if we look at well-being, it's very similar. So not only is it nice to use the right words and communicate well, it actually changes the way we think and behave. And of course, the philosophers of language will argue about how much Vygotsky and Wittgenstein, these sorts of people, it actually impacts. One of my colleagues, Dr. Tim Lomas at Harvard, he's working on the notion of untranslatable words. I asked there for a translation into Indonesian language because words themselves have particular meanings. So if we start working with language and explore it, we can actually make meaningful differences to the way people approach and experience well-being. And so there are different levels and layers to this. Okay, the way to understand the capability model of wellbeing literacy, there's essentially 5 components. You say literacy and people usually hear vocabulary and they usually think of reading and writing. That is the traditional literacy approach. Nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of work in literacy and literacy learning that's moved well beyond thinking of it only like that. However, component 1 of the model is exactly that, wellbeing, vocabulary and knowledge. So I literally just asked for a translation of the word wellbeing. I'll be curious to learn and I am curious because I don't know, and this is one of the wonderful things about these types of visits. I'll be very interested to hear about the other vocabulary that you have and use about wellbeing. Is it about mental health? Is it about the absence of illness? Is it about wellbeing? Is it about values? I don't know. It will be there and someone will know and we'll find out. But the other thing about words, of course, vocal words, vocabulary, is that they signify something. They denote something. They point to something, or they can connote something. They can create you to think about something else. But essentially, component 1 is really the vocabulary and knowledge about So what do you know about well-being? What do you think about well-being? And what words do you use to communicate it? They talk about the Eskimos having many, many words for snow. What we do know is that people don't actually have as many words for positive states like happiness, joy, as they do for negative states like anger, sadness, and things that are seen as negative. We actually know that. So if we think about well-being as involving positive things, we actually need to enable people to have a greater repertoire or vocabulary about the area, or they will default back to seeing things through a negative lens, which in the literature is known as negativity bias. We pay more attention to negative events. So we'll pay more attention to a person who's experiencing distress than we will to the general idea of building well-being across the whole education system. The next two components, that's the about, before I move off the first component, that's the about part. That's the communicating about. We're referring to something. We're talking about feeling good, feeling bad, whatever it may be. We're being quite literal in the way we're communicating. The next two components are very familiar to. Is there a literacy educator here? Someone who teaches about literacy and learning? So these are fairly familiar. And when I say literacy, I don't just mean schools or universities or colleges. Literacy is how we use language. And we can use language at home, we can use language in a relationship, we can use language with our children, we use language in any workplace. So this is whole of population relevant, talking about literacy of the whole population as we communicate about and for well-being. So these are familiar, well-being comprehension and well-being composition. They come in pairs. You listen and you speak. You read and you write, and you view and you create. But if you want a well-being system, and if you think of an organisation as a language system, so if you take this university, you can actually ask the question, how does this university communicate about and for well-being? What do they do in terms of listening and speaking about and for well-being? What do they do in terms of reading and writing about and for well-being? And what do they do in terms of viewing and creating about and for well-being? We just saw the dance. You viewed it, they created it. Was it intentionally done for well-being? I think it was. I think there was a whole lot of cultural values, there was a whole lot of things expressed, there was joy, there was a whole lot of things that happened just then. And so that is one instance of this type of wellbeing literacy practice. The fourth component, context awareness. How do we adapt the way we use language for the well-being of self and others? Do you speak to your friend the same way you speak to the rector? That's an example of context awareness. The context of formal rector, someone in a significant, important position. I'm sure your friend is significant and important too, but the way you communicate with them is different. But context awareness is a hugely important part of language use, but it's hugely important for the way we think about well-being. And finally, the fifth component of this model is intentionality. I don't know how that translates. Intentionality. Nina, I'm going to lean on you again. Is that going to translate, or is it going to be the same word? Intentionality.
Kesengajaan, intentionality.
Thank you. Should be paid as a translator. So intentionality, and at least this is the way we're defining it here, it's the habit of doing it. It's how do we help people develop this capability so they're constantly thinking about the way they use language for the benefit of themselves or the benefit of others in terms of well-being. This includes self-talk. This includes inside your own head. Inside your own head, I is talking to me. So that the ideas of things like in the cognitive behaviour therapy, which is a popular psychotherapy in many nations now, helping people look at their cognitions. A lot of that is based on the idea of self-talk. So that is relevant to this approach. So you can start to see how widespread, because language is everywhere, our opportunities to impact on well-being. If you accept that well-being, how we think and the language, if you accept the language we use impacts the way we think and feel, language is everywhere, the opportunity to impact on well-being is everywhere by focusing on the way we use language. And it's another way of thinking about it is a community, an organisation is a language system. There's lots and lots of language use going on in this university, in the classroom. So rather than a single program of well-being or a single intervention, think about the overall language systems that impact all of who we are and what we do. Intentionality is the habit. So not just once, how do I help people do this over and over and for it to become a habit of mind so that they're constantly thinking about the way they use language for the purpose of well-being. Okay, for those of you that don't like tables and prefer pictures, we have been using quite a few pictures to communicate this approach. So what you see there is two people interacting. Looks like he is singing and she is dancing. Not that different than what we saw before. One form, he's creating something and he's also speaking or singing. She's listening and moving. So there's an interaction. And it's not just one way, it's two, which is like what actually happens. He's composing something. She's listening. He's probably creating something as well, and she's creating something by dancing. So there's an interaction. The question here, that's a standard literacy approach. The question is, what's going on in terms of what are they communicating about, and is it for the purpose of well-being? Not all communication has to be like that. Wellbeing literacy focuses on the piece that does that. And then the other three components are up the top, the vocabulary and knowledge about wellbeing. It's not enough just to teach people the language of wellbeing, lots of words, but it's a good start. And that's exactly what is happening, and that is component one. Component two is the sensitivity and adaptation to context. When you change roles, if you're the rector, the daughter, the son, the wife, the husband, whatever role you're in, that's a context change. If you're in a party, if you're at a dinner, if you're at a formal lecture, you will use language differently, but also the ability to do that, or what becomes a capability, is what we're talking about. You can talk about it, but can you actually do it? That is where we're going with wellbeing literacy. One of the things that's important to think about wellbeing literacy is we say, we want to improve the wellbeing of our students. We hear that a lot. We want to improve the wellbeing of our students. And educators, teachers, well, they should be involved. And then that slips, and it's like becomes, well, the teacher or the educator is responsible for the well-being of the student. It's like, well, they partially are, but there are many, many other things that will impact on the well-being of the student, like previous trauma, economy, whether they've got somewhere to live. A teacher or an educator can only do so much. However, I would argue that the teacher or educator is more responsible for the wellbeing literacy, helping the student communicate better about and for wellbeing. That's actually more of an educator's role, and it's actually closer to the educator than all things related to wellbeing, which are impacted by so many other things. We call that a proximal outcome. It's closer to the teacher and the educator than wellbeing, because there are so many other things that will impact on the wellbeing of a person that's not only related to teacher and educator. The final one, that's a compassionate owl. So the intentional part. So if you're interested in, say, integrating Islam approach to this type of model, and I am, because I don't know, I like to learn. So I love these conversations where we take ideas and have conversations. What are the core tenets of Islam? What intentions would a good person have? And you can probably answer that very quickly, I imagine. Many of you will be able to give me an answer quite quickly. How does that relate to language use? That is where I'd like to see the intersection of these types of approaches with great traditions like Islam. So that's a way of looking at it visually. Again, I'll just track you through these. These are just different representations of the same thing. So what that is yes, that's just literacy. What you're seeing there is just literacy. When it becomes wellbeing literacy, is thinking about the intentional use of those skills in a context as a habit for the purpose of well-being, and using well-being related language to do it. Otherwise it's just language, but it isn't. It's more specific than that. So just to reiterate, comprehending about and for. So when you listen, we listen a lot, or we should listen a lot. It's probably one of the great leadership qualities that isn't used well enough. But when you listen, how well are you listening? How intentionally are you listening for the benefit of the speaker or the benefit of yourself? And do you listen differently depending on the context? And have you developed it as a habit where you really try to do it a lot for the purpose of well-being? Has anyone here had, I'm going to ask a question, can anyone here think of a time where you felt really listened to and it felt really good? No? No one's been listened to, Nina? I'll ask again. Has anyone here, can you remember a time when you've been really listened to and you felt someone has listened to you very well and you have felt good about it? We've got one. So there's only one. No. So a lot of work to do here. No. So, and conversely, I think you to think about a time where you didn't feel listened to and how it felt. And we can all think of that too. So they're simple examples. One of the things going further down, reading. We're in an academic educational institution, so reading is very familiar to us. It's something we do a lot of, or we'll feel guilty if we haven't been doing enough of. It's very familiar. This is really are you intentionally reading for about and for well-being? So it's both. Are you reading about well-being? Yeah, you go and read some papers on well-being, that's okay. But are you also reading for well-being? Are you reading with an intention for the purpose of well-being? So it narrows it. It's not just reading in general, it's about and for well-being. It's something to think about what that would look like. And viewing. Viewing can mean many things. You just viewed a dance, you can view comedy, you can view movies, you can go to an art gallery and view art. All of these are the multimodal examples of well-being. Reading, writing, speaking, listening, creating, viewing. One thing we know from positive psychology and positive psychology interventions, most of the interventions, the so-called well-being interventions that have been developed, technically, they're mostly reading and writing exercises. Go and get a person to write about gratitude, how grateful they are. Nothing wrong with that, it's great. My point is that most of the interventions have been in one mode of communication, reading and writing. Whereas our arts and humanities friends will tell us, well, we've been doing dancing and comedy and making movies, we've been doing that for centuries. Why isn't that being thought about in terms of well-being? So the multimodal approach to thinking about this is very important. So if you are designing a well-being study or a well-being intervention, I encourage you to think about what modes of communication are you using and how can you go beyond the reading and writing. One of the things we're seeing with social media is emoji. Emoji, is that a familiar term here? Emoji? No, it's the little symbols when we text. Yeah? Is there a translation for emoji? Okay, emoticon. Yeah. So if you think about emoticon, it's sort of reading and writing, but it's actually creating and viewing. So you're actually doing, this is everywhere. You're actually using emoticons to communicate. It's a visual image, it's a small icon, but how are you doing in that and how is that being used in social media? So that is another example of creating and viewing. So wellbeing literacy is picking up the broad range of communicating about and for wellbeing, or not. Think about the opposite. If you intentionally want to harm someone, what would that look like in a communication way? And I'm just getting you to think about that so you can think about the concept. We're seeing artificial intelligence and the use and the creation of very horrible images, creating horrible images of people and putting them out into social media to do harm. That is almost the opposite of what I'm talking about, the capability of wellbeing literacy. We're seeing it isn't that hard to think about the opposite, and what I'm saying is on things like social media and with the rise of technologies like artificial intelligence, it's becoming easier to create images to do harm. But you can also create images to do good. We just took a whole lot of photos. I've been taking photos ever since I arrived here. But I think we've been doing that for good intention. We're creating an image for someone else to view for the future. My mother-in-law lives in an aged care facility. She's getting quite old now, but she likes the photos I take. So I literally send her photos of anything related to family every week. I have 32,000 photos literally in my phone or in the cloud, and I just send her photos. So that's the creation of an image for someone else to view with the intention of improving well-being. I don't only take photos for her, I take photos, but I know that they can do good. So that's the intentional use of intentional creation of an image for someone else to view for the purpose of doing good. It's one example of a practice of wellbeing literacy, as opposed to things that are going on in other parts of social media where people are taking photos of people making them look ugly and then spreading them so children can be bullied. That's the opposite. So that's the model, what it looks like. Okay, that's just the opposite side. So when we see children or anyone creating something, drawing something. I was at a presentation at the British School of Jakarta. I literally gave a talk, my colleague gave a talk, and as I sat down, he gave me a picture of something he'd drawn. He drew a picture of me speaking and then he gave it to me. So he intentionally created something and then gifted it to me for my viewing. And it was, again, an example of that type of practice. So come back to this slide. You can see it has multiple bits. To understand wellbeing literacy, I want you to think that it's much more than vocabulary and knowledge. One of the key aspects to it is getting you to think across the multiple modes, so more than reading and writing, the other modes, and what opportunities are you not taking when you're not thinking about those other modes of communication, when you're thinking about well-being and flourishing. And also, have a look, language does not use itself. Dictionary can sit there, but language does not use itself. No such thing as a private language. Language has a user, and the user has intentions, and we want those intentions to be guided by good, and we want those intentions to be a habit. And we want the overall capability for the person to have, not only have those language intentions, to be able to use them flexibly. That is the capability of wellbeing literacy. And if we have a broader amount of people that have that capability, we're more likely to achieve a wider population health of wellbeing. This is not just an educational concept, this is a public health or population health concept. So I'm not going to keep going through all of those slides because I actually have done most of that. Those slides I just skipped, I've already done. They were just ways of showing you the different pretty pictures. And these slides will be available to you. So the question I have to you, to come to the measurement piece. So we've written multiple papers on wellbeing literacy. We've written concept papers. I've taken you through the concept. And the reason I've taken you through the concepts is you already have your own examples. You have your own context. The idea of this approach is that the use of language and the meaning of language changes depending on the context it's used. So Ludwig Wittgenstein talked a lot about that. So you have your context. Words have a particular meaning. The expressions have a particular meaning in your context. It's your job to fill in your context to these more formal models. However, I want you to think, is anyone here married? Personal question. We've got one person who's married up the back. Almost all. So if you don't want to answer these questions for yourself, think about your partner. Think about who you're married to and think about their level of wellbeing literacy. So this tool is called the WellLit 6. So it's a 6-item self-report scale. So if anyone's here as a psychologist, you love scales. Psychologists always love scales. Talk to a psychologist and they'll measure you. And they'll measure something with a scale. And I say that because I was a psychologist, but this is a 6-item scale. So I have many words I can think of to communicate about well-being. What that implies is that somewhere you've got a definition of what well-being is hidden away in your head. You've got a concept of well-being. You may have a concept of mental health. You may or may not have a concept of flourishing. It might be not a familiar word. So underpinning this model is the assumption that we all have a different concept of what well-being is. It doesn't provide you with the definition of well-being. What it does is it does it the other way around. We go into different language communities, be it school children in Java. That's a language community, which is different than the language community in Silicon Valley of people working in a tech organization. Different language community. But within those communities, they'll also have different concepts about what well-being is. And this is what the literature calls lay concepts of well-being. How people in general have a concept of what well-being is, and not just what it is, but more importantly, they'll usually have a concept of how they can achieve it. And that is very related to the vocabulary that they will use. So the first question we ask people, and we've got increasingly large levels of data sets. I think we have an 80,000 student data set from South Australia of the school students, and we ask them these questions. This tool has been translated in English, French, Spanish, and I think we just went to Portuguese last week. We haven't gone to Indonesia yet, but it's asking these questions to populations. So the first question is, I have many words I can think of to communicate about well-being. So straight up question, when I say well-being, what other words do you think of? This is your moment. When I say well-being, are there any other words you think of straight away? There's no right answer.
Well-being to me can be your personal stability.
Personal stability. And we could keep going. And there are many studies that do exactly this. They look at associated words and terms. What matters is the context you're in. What language community are you in? And what would they be using? 7-year-olds, 15-year-olds, your partner. Does your partner, the person you're married to, because I hear that you're nearly all married, what words do they use to communicate about well-being? Stereotypically, many men would say that, many women would say that if their male partner doesn't have enough words to talk about well-being and emotions, for example, don't know. So we often ask that question because it gets people to truly think about their own relationship and who they're relating to. While we're thinking about that, is there a person who comes to mind for you, someone who you believe has very high levels of wellbeing literacy, someone who you think communicates really well for well-being, the way they talk about the use of well-being language? Can you think of someone who you believe does that well? Anyone? Yep. The Paragon, excellent. Yeah. Okay, I'll just finish with the last two questions. So I have the skills to express myself. So that's the expressing or composing part of it. I actually have the skills to express myself. We hear a lot about people holding things in, not expressing themselves. Do they actually have the vocabulary? This is very interesting to me because I can remember I used to work as a clinical psychologist. I originally trained as a clinical psychologist before I moved into other areas. And I used to work with people with schizophrenia, and the largest number of hospital days, accounts for the largest number of days of people in hospital, at least it does in Australia. And I listened, we wrote a couple of books on mental health recovery. We looked at the people's stories about their recovery. And what struck me, there were certain patients or consumers, they literally didn't have the words. They'd spent 15 years inside a mental hospital, and they knew words like illness, voices. They had a very elaborate vocabulary about illness. So if you wanted to talk to them or wanted them to tell a story or construct a story about hope and future and well-being, they couldn't. And a lot of it was to do with language. They actually didn't have the vocabulary anymore to tell the story, because they were so saturated, their language system was so saturated with illness. So I've seen this in a real literal sense. It's not just a nice idea. I've actually seen it play out actively in people's lives, because they couldn't use language to construct alternative. People to generate GDP for the nation. And then I said, if we're going to achieve population well-being, we need to have a big look at our language use, because language is a big lever, and it's one of the things that makes us human. We use language better than any other species. So it's a big lever. If we want to change well-being, let's have a look at the way we use language. And let's also think about well-being as different than mental health. It's not that one's right and one's wrong, it's that they're two different dimensions, both important. And finally, I tracked you through an overview of the capability model. Think about its components, but put simply, it's the intentional language use about and for well-being, which we adapt by context, because the meaning of words and the meaning of language changes by context. People get frustrated because I don't give them a single definition of well-being. I say, well, there is a concept of well-being, but it will be expressed very differently by context. And that we have got some preliminary ways of measuring it. The Well Lit 6-item scale is one, but there are many others that we're working on. And we're also going across context to see how this looks and feels differently in different contexts. So on that note, I will finish there. And I must say, I got to eat some snake fruit this morning too, so I was very happy about the snake fruit and I can see some right here. So on that note, I'll stop and I'll sit, and I'm really keen to get, if we have time, to get some questions and comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your great points. Yeah, I do agree that, yeah, we need well-being literacy to go through our life. Since you are talking about human flourishing, it is about when an individual realizes about their potential, and it is highly related with how well-being literacy is imperative to be applied. We are now halfway through. We are going to open a Q&A. Yeah? I'm curious of what audience have in mind. Please raise your hand and then say your name and institution. A lot of raising hands there. Yeah. We start from here. Ridwan. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Bello Ridwan Alaba from Nigeria, a master student from this faculty. First and foremost, I sincerely want to appreciate you for this wonderful and insightful presentation. I think to me it is a new trajectory to take as a prospective researcher, as I believe education is center to all other sectors of life. So thank you very much. So my question goes thus. Number one, I want to ask, is nature or nurture? Has nature and nurture, environmental and heredity? I mean, do you think it has any impact on the way we communicate about well-being? So that's the first question. Second one is the way we communicate about well-being, is it gender-based or not? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. And as you mentioned, Nigeria, I was thinking of my dear colleague, Professor Yusuf Waghid. He's not from Nigeria, he's from the more southern parts of Africa, but in the work we did, I worked with him closely on the UNESCO project, and he was teaching us about Ubuntu, but also importantly that all education is intercultural, which he got that idea from the African grasslands when one tribe would meet another tribe, and that was the definition of education. It was the learning that was happening between cultures. So whenever I think of Africa, I think of Yusuf and that really important insight that all education is intercultural. So your second question was about gender, and that's easier to answer. So a lot of the languages, particularly the Latin languages, have masculine and feminine built into them. So the answer, of course, is yes. But you didn't ask the question of whether they should be like that, which is a different question. But without answering the question of whether they should be, I think the point is the very power of the fact of the reason they're gendered also speaks to that issue of context that I was talking about. So wellbeing literacy would ask how are we using language and if it's gendered or not, and would it be better in that context to be using it differently. So my answer is yes, language is gendered. From a wellbeing literacy framework, it would be to consider that in the context and look at your intentions and look at the receiver of the language and the impact it might have. It speaks to the power of language. Language can construct and deconstruct people's psychological realities, which is why we're focusing on it. So we need to pay a lot of attention. One of the problems we have is if we think well-being and mental health are the same, often the discourse will get taken off into a medical paradigm, which is not necessarily where it needs to go. We need to be here in the moment and taking responsibility for our language use. So my answer is yes. What to do with the yes, we need to keep talking about. The first question, nature, nurture, I also I sometimes go back to old nature and culture. So nurture is one part, but if we think about nurture or culture as anything which is learned or learnable, the dancing we saw was a cultural artifact. People through generations had learned how to do that, passed it on. So that was cultural. So most of the things I've been talking about would be nurture or culture, i.e. learnable, changeable. But people's ability to use language. That, you know, some brains are built better than others, so the verbal fluency, those types of ideas, they may have it may be easier for them to start with. The same with empathy. There's a bit of empathy involved in some aspects of the wellbeing literacy model, where we talk about context and intentionality, those last two components. There is some evidence that there's some genetic ability related there. But also, if you go to the debates of, again, people like Vygotsky and the language philosophy, the argument and the Whorf hypothesis, the arguments about how much can language shape thought and, how much can language shape thought. There is, with epigenetics, there is evidence that different cultures think differently because of where they grew up, where they were born, and there is some evidence on the way language shapes thought, and then we start to get into that debate. So it's there's a few comments there on nature and nurture. I'm not sure if I've answered your intent of your question, but I would say a lot of what we've talked about is nurture, but there is some evidence of the ability of language to shape thought individually and intergenerationally. What the epigeneticists are doing with that, I don't know. You'd have to ask an epigeneticist. There are good examples of how, some of the recent work on culture is informative, and the debates between culture and language. But there is some recent evidence that cultures that grew rice, such as I imagine this is one of them, are more collectivists, whereas cultures that farmed other things in agriculture were more individualistic. So there are those sorts of studies that try to tap into that. But it's not my area of expertise, but I've had a go at least, so thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Talking about nurture and nurture in the developmental perspective is still being debatable and investigated up until now. Yeah, next, let's say, Fadila. Mike, please.
Good afternoon, Prof. and Bu Cherry. My name is Fadila. I'm ME student. Prof, as far as I know that the genre of text has two types, fiction and non-fiction. And I'm questioning, is fiction good for us, for our well-being? Because I was fiction writer before, and nowadays I think that fiction is leading us to deny cause and effect system. So it's like tend to imagination. For example, in Cinderella story, Beauty and the Beast story, and even Harry Potter, they teach us to be okay in difficult condition and show kindness even someone hurt us. So is it good for our well-being, the fiction story? And the second question is, when we are listening sad song, sometimes it will validate our emotion, but also sometimes leading us to be more depressed. So what's your opinion, sir? Thank you.
Okay, so I understand we have two questions. They're good at putting in two. So we have, is fiction or reading fiction good for your well-being? And just to clarify, the second question was sad song. Okay, just remind me the second question. So we'll start with the fiction. I have a colleague, Professor Peter Otto. He's a professor of romantic literature, from the romanticism. And the key word there was imagination. In general, we know that reading is good for us, and then there are examples of bibliotherapy. But in fiction in particular, the imaginative component, the idea to imagine different possibilities. And there are some studies and evidence that show that is helpful, because if your current situation is bad, but you have the ability to imagine different situations and create them, that can be good for your well-being. We're seeing examples of climate fiction and young people worried about the climate, and the use of climate fiction with young people to help them make sense of the future and hopelessness that they may have about environmental degradation. So there are studies that are actually looking to answer your question in specific contexts. But if I had to give you a general overarching leaning, I would say yes, fiction is good for well-being. And what I would ask, to use the wellbeing literacy model, fiction is fiction, it's there, someone has created something, someone has written something to be read, but what's the intention of the reader? Why are they going to read certain fiction? They will usually have an intention. It might be because it was prescribed and it was part of the curriculum, they were needed to read it, but if they're choosing it, they're probably choosing it for a reason, to elaborate some idea or to learn or feel in a particular way. So one of the things to frame your question in terms of the wellbeing literacy model, it would seek to look at the intention of the reader. What are they trying to get from reading fiction? But I would point to the possibilities that are created by the imaginative component, the emancipatory, the ability to free one from the current reality by seeing alternative realities, and that can be very well-being enhancing. Okay, sad songs lead to depression, that type of question. I see that through the lens of, again, similar to what I just said, what's the intention, if any, of the listener? Why are they listening to that song? I listen to songs for a particular reason. I listen to songs not always, but when I'm being intentional, I do it to regulate my emotions or energy. So I won't listen to sad songs in the morning when I get up at 6 o'clock and I have to get somewhere and I'm trying to go, and I'll listen to songs that are energizing. So yes, sad songs can definitely maintain someone who's already feeling sad or clinically depressed, and sometimes people will choose them because they get stuck in that. So I would answer the question in terms of what's the role of the song in the emotional regulation process of the person. Are they listening to be sad? Is the song maintaining the sadness? I'm starting to sound like a clinical psychologist here, but it is that kind of, I would think about it from an emotional regulation point of view. And if a person's really depressed and they keep listening to the songs and it's maintaining their depression, well then something needs to be done. But feeling sad isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's one of the overall human emotions. It's part of an experience that people may need to have. But yes, the songs have a direct route to our emotional systems, and absolutely listening to a sad song could make you continue to feel sad. So long answer, but I'm just trying to put it in that regulatory, emotional regulation framing. My concern would be that if a person got stuck and they were just going over and over the same song and not having the emotional agility and flexibility that a functional person kind of needs to get by. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Prof. All right, we're going to, oh yeah, one of the alumni, Dian.
So thank you for the opportunity, and sorry I'm a bit hiding. I was in the middle of the audience. It's just I feel bad to pass some people to go back. So I'm really interested to your some of your statements during your presentation. I'm trying to connect them and make sense of it. So during the presentation, you mentioned about how education and well-being will be able to answer several challenges faced today, like anxiety and depression. But then, on the other hand, you also say that human flourishing is about figuring out or finding somebody's potential. My question is, does that mean that somebody who feels like anxious or, let's say, depressed is someone that who's not like personally aware of his or her well-being? And my second question, as an educator in educational setting, what is the exact practical step that we can do to help our students to, let's say, avoid that kind of anxiety and depression in the classroom? I mean, like, the statement sounds like a bit very poetic, but in practical implementation in classroom, it's quite challenging for us because to see how students have different potentials, we still have this stigma or stereotypes. If you are brilliant, then you're good at math. If you're brilliant, you're good at science. But those people who are, let's say, enjoying dancing, singing, and other, let's say, non-academic stuff is still quite like, neglected. So I hope I can get answers from you and insights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. There's a few things in there. There's quite a lot of aspects to your question. Firstly, just to clarify, maybe the comments about anxiety and depression. My main point is that we need to think about well-being, high well-being, low well-being, high mental illness symptoms, low mental illness symptoms. We need to think about them as two independent dimensions, if you like, two different areas. So what I mean by that is you can have symptoms of anxiety or depression, high or low, but you can also have high levels of well-being and low levels of well-being, and they're not the same thing. So, for example, I've worked with people with schizophrenia who have symptoms, quite disabling symptoms. They're hearing voices, but they can still experience and have reasonable levels of well-being, even though they had symptoms of illness. So, my main point is that mental health and well-being, or mental illness particularly, and well-being are two different things. Another way that just to grasp that, I have a different presentation which I didn't give on this today, but if we think about, at least in English-speaking world, we use the word masculine and feminine a lot, and we associate masculine with males and feminine with females. Understandably, that's kind of what the origins. But the question there would be, can a female show masculine traits? Or can a male show feminine traits? And the answer is yes, they can. They're actually two separate dimensions. You have high masculinity, low masculinity. You have high femininity, low masculinity. Will females show more feminine traits? Probably, and likewise. But so just by separating the two, you have different conversations. And the reason that's important, and we wrote a book on this as well in the mental health recovery work. If you've got a mental illness, if you only think about it as one, you have a mental illness, high well-being, low well-being. It means if you have a mental illness, you can't have well-being, and that's false. So it's important to separate the two. My point about the education piece is I believe that the education system has a lot it can contribute to the well-being more broadly. However, in your classrooms, you will have people with clinical level mental health conditions, clinical depression, or a range of those conditions, which educators are having to deal with all the time. Part of the problem they have, though, is they're not equipped. my view in terms of responsibility of the educator is, yes, you are responsible for contributing more to the wellbeing space. You are responsible for accommodating and working with people with the clinical level conditions and or referring them to clinical services if the clinical services exist. So I don't know if that clarifies, but in terms of anxiety and depression, to come to your second point, in the classroom, flourishing and wellbeing are big words. I think one thing that might be more helpful when we're talking literally in a classroom or educational context is to get finer grained, talking about attention, motivation and emotions. And then if we start talking about emotions and motivations and attention in the classroom, that is probably going to take you closer and more tangible rather than the sort of big policy words like flourishing and cross-nation stuff. And we do, we increasingly know about what's happening with emotions in the classroom. We wrote a paper on activity emotions recently and the relationship between boredom, emotions like boredom, which is a very relevant in terms of engagement in education. Boredom is this really relevant one. So we're learning more and more about that. I think I think you were asking for practical suggestions. What can you do? One thing I would do is have a look at what's happening in the classroom in terms of emotions and motivation. Yes, that all gets wrapped into well-being, but it isn't just well-being. It's straight up emotions of learning. Secondary, in terms of the language use, wellbeing literacy, my simple recommendation would be look at the multi-modality. So try and get beyond the reading and writing. And if you're not already doing that, a lot of the presentation here it's not all meant to be new. In many ways, it's more of a framework that people can use to make sense of what they're already doing, and then look at the parts that they may not be doing and could be doing. So I'm not sure if that's practical enough, but I've tried to, probably one of the things I would say is don't ask me. Get with your colleagues, take the model and the framework and ask each other, because I don't know your specific context, but how could you take these ideas and make them relevant not only to your student population but to your language context is probably the thing. You and your peers, you and your colleagues, you've got the skills. What I'm saying is you could answer your own question probably better than I could, but use these frameworks and make sense of them relevant to your context. It's a bit like saying we're all cooks, but you're the one that has the recipe for you. I've just bought a few ingredients, but you're the one that picks them correctly. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. I would like to give opportunity for students who sit, or audience who sit at the back. I saw some, a lot, okay. Mr. Furqan, please choose one.
We have the presenters maybe from the University of, where are you from?
I'm sorry, I just think like maybe there is a chance for me as a non-UEE student or something. That's why. Okay, thank you. I'm really interested in the topic of well-being, especially personally, it's something new for me. Usually well-being is something related to well-being in health or in things, but this is well-being in education, so that's why that's really interesting. I'm just curious if it is in Australia, not to compare, but in Indonesia right now, well-being literacy is something really serious that the students really struggle with the literacy in Indonesia. Not only the students, I believe the teachers do. And then I'm just curious, as a big country that is well managed in everything in Australia, how do they compose the well-being into the educational system? Is there any something related to the curriculum, for example, or something related to what kind of topic, for example, at school? And then the last is there any still problem over there even? I mean, I believe that people or society are really aware, not like here that our situation is different. So do people that still have a problem and the challenge, I mean, and especially when it comes to the curriculum, school, or something related to the awareness of the well-being itself. Thank you for the chance.
Okay, thank you for your question. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, we're going to talk about the Australian context as a comparison. So a couple of points. Obviously, Australia is a wealthy nation with a relatively small population. But if we talk about the school system, also one third of the Australian school system is private. So and that's large by world standards. That's a large private sector, meaning that they're more well funded. They have resources, and that is relevant to some of the conversations about what can and should be done in schools. The other thing I'd say about the Australian context is absolutely there's a mental illness challenge. We have the high prevalence disorders of anxiety and depression, substance misuse. There's a lot of those challenges with their young people. They're definitely there, notwithstanding a wealthy population. Of course, our Indigenous people, when I say of course, I shouldn't, but it feels of course because we're hearing about it so much. Our Indigenous populations have particularly bad health profiles, but they also live in very different, some of them live in the urban areas, but many of them live in the regional areas. So if you're in a large country, like a large physical country like Australia, you have to also look at where people live, the urban. So you know, we have a very large, 90% of our population's urban. 1/3 of our whole country lives in Sydney and Melbourne. So when in asking your question, you need to think about urban, regional, rural, and remote, and they have different health profiles. It pretty much gets worse as that order I went through. But in terms of, more specifically in terms of schools, you have examples in the private sector. You'll see very well-to-do schools that are really, you know, well-being or flourishing schools, and the idea of positive education, so the use of positive psychology in education is very popular in Australia, but it's particularly in those private, well-funded schools. It's similar to, but slightly different from social or emotional learning. In the public school curriculum and teacher education, there are examples in Adelaide, in South Australia, of it being directly integrated into curriculum in a broad way, like throughout the whole teacher education curriculum. And you're also seeing reasonably good examples in Melbourne, Victoria, in the Department of Education about taking wellbeing seriously and the funding of public schools to use wellbeing interventions to get from a menu. So you are seeing it. However, there's always an alternative discourse. You say wellbeing, they hear mental health. You say wellbeing, they hear prevention of anxiety and depression. So you have these kind of two discourses that play out. They're both important, but I would argue they have a different purpose. So there's a few comments. I'm not sure if I've answered, but yeah. I think that little one's hungry. Or tired.
MC, how many times do we have?
Okay, we are waiting for the Vice Minister Mora, so it's all about to arrive. Okay, we still have maybe one more questions. Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. I cannot see clearly. Is it Shifa? Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to ask you one question, brief question. Stand up. Thank you. My name is Shifa. I'm a PhD student in University Triple IU, Universitas Islam International Indonesia. Just one brief question about teacher well-being. This well-being literacy need to be increased also in teacher well-being, yeah. Because if the well-being of teacher is not good enough, or the well-being literacy is not good enough, then how can they make sure that their child will reach their potential of flourishing in their lives? Do you have any model that we can implement in the educational school, especially in early childhood education, to make sure that teacher well-being literacy can be increased? Because in early childhood education, their emotional intelligence and their emotional support need to be increased, and they need very high emotional support because they take care of the children, which really transition to the elementary schools. Yeah, maybe you can explain to us about that. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Professor. Okay, before answering to the last question from Mbak Sifa, we are going to welcome the Vice Minister of Religious Affairs of Indonesia. All audiences are invited to stand up.
We would like to say welcome to Kiai Haji Saifur Rahman Dasuki MSc as a Vice Minister of Religious Affairs of Republic of Indonesia. Welcome to Universitas Islam International Indonesia.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to continue for the last questions. Yeah. Okay, you can continue for the last questions. Thank you very much. And for all participants, you can sit back. Thank you.
Yeah, Shifa.
Okay, I'll just to finish the answer to that question. My comment would be, I'm going to answer a question with a question, and that is, how different is the early childhood and the child education educator different than any other educator? And more broadly, how different is it than any what we would call workplace wellbeing program? What I'm saying is there are many programs that we can use to improve people's well-being and well-being in the workplace, and they exist. So my question back to you is, how much of the issue you're raising is a general workplace well-being question, which is not separate from any other workplace? But I would say I totally agree with you I totally agree with you that that the well-being of the educator will impact on the well-being of the student, and in your case, particularly with that age group, because there's the emotional resonance and the the emotional synchrony between the child and the educator. So I think it's critically important. But my point is that I don't think you need a special wellbeing program. There are many, and it's really the will of the employer, etc., to take the educators' wellbeing seriously. We're seeing around the world challenges on educators, be they early childhood, secondary, primary, all levels of educators. A worldwide shortage of teacher educators, but also a quick turnover of staff in that sector. So we definitely need to be doing something in general, or these problems, and they're not just supply problems, they're maintenance problems of how do we keep our workers. I was involved in a project in New South Wales where we included teacher wellbeing in the policy, and then it was taken out because everyone wants to focus on the children or the students. But we are learning more and more from organisations around the world that we have to look at the wellbeing of the employee, or it costs us not only socially but also economically. So in summary, yes, you're absolutely correct. You don't need a particular wellbeing program, but we need to find ways so that your staff get supported. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lindsay. Yes, thank you so much for very insightful lesson today. For sure, this is give us a lot of benefits and surely a very enlightening topic to motivate us in applying well-being insight in our respective fields. I would like to wrap up this session that Professor Lindsay explained a lot about well-being literacy, that human flourishing is when individuals realize their potential. And education system have a great contribution for shaping one's potential by improving curriculum, pedagogy, and other educational aspects. And when well-being is implemented, academic achievement will be there. Thank you so much, Prof. Dear all attendees, thank you again. I wish you enjoy as much as I did. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the insightful discussion that has added to our knowledge. Indeed, this discussion will be effectively used in the future research.
We would like to ask Professor Lindsay Oates and Associate Professor Charina Yuriskianti to stay on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as we extend sincere gratitude and admirations for our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Lindsay Oates, we humbly request the presence of the Dean of the Faculty of Education, Professor Nina Nurmila, to present the special package to our distinguished guest. Hold on. We would like to ask the faculty members of Universitas Islam International Indonesia and also the dancer performers to take photo together in the stage. Yeah. We also would like to invite the Vice Minister of Religious Affairs to come together to take photo together with us. And also the Rector of Universitas Islam International. Okay. We would like to invite the faculty members for the dancer performance. Please hold on. Yeah, okay. So please hold on for the dancer. We are going to have the, hold on, later. Okay, we invite the faculty members first to come to take photo together, please. Okay, so now for the dancer performance, and we would like to invite the Professor Lindsay Oates also to take photo together to the stage. Thank you, everyone. You may get back to your seat.
Cek, 1, 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite the second keynote speaker, Kiai Haji Saiful Rahmat Dasuki, SIPMSE, the Vice Minister of Religious Affairs of Republic of Indonesia, with the topic, Practicing Moderate Islam to Improve Well-being in Educational Setting in Indonesia. And the session will be moderated by Professor Dina Nurmila, PhD, the Dean of Faculty of Education, Universitas Islam International, Indonesia.
Please join us in welcoming Kiai Haji Saiful Rahmat Dasuki, MSc, and Professor Nina Nurmila, PhD, to the stage.
Oke, Pak Kiai, Pak Wamen mau duduk di sini, silahkan. Ya, Pak Wamen bisa duduk di sini, nanti saya perkenalkan dulu sebentar. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are very happy to have our Vice Minister of Ministry of Religious Affairs to come here today. Terima kasih banyak ya Pak Haji. That's what his nickname is. So I would like to introduce him first before he deliver his speech. I would like to have a warm welcome to him. Selamat datang ya. So I would like to introduce him, Honorable the Vice Minister Haji Saiful Rahmat Dasuki, SIP MSI. He was born in Jakarta in 7 December 1971, so he's younger than me, and he's Batavian. And as I told you that his nickname is Pak Haji, and he has a vision that the best person is the best who can give benefit to others. So khairun nas anfa'hum linnas, and he has also the mission that the best ummah is the ummah who can instruct to do a good deed and prevent wrongdoing. So it is in Arabic, Amar Ma'ruf Nahi Munkar. He completed his education from primary school until master level in Jakarta, and he is considered to be a successful man in his career, organization, and political party. So he is from Partai Persatuan Pembangunan, United Development Party, and he is now, like MC has mentioned, is the Vice Minister of Religious Affairs beginning this 2023 until 2024. And he is also the chairman of DWP United Development Party from 2022 until 2027. And he is also the head of regional leadership GP Ansor in Jakarta from 2012 up until 2022. And he is also the lecturer at Universitas CAI FoE from 2004 until now. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our Vice Minister, and he will deliver his speech in Indonesian language under the title Pendidikan Media Efektif dalam Mendiseminasi Nilai-nilai Wasatiyah. Kami persilakan Pak Wamen. Terima kasih. Okay. And I will translate or summarize his speech in English after he delivered the speech. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin sayyidina wa nabiyuna wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Amma ba'du. Yang terhormat Bapak Rektor, Bapak Profesor Dr. Jamhari. Yang terhormat Ibu Dekan, Ibu Profesor Dr. Nina Narmila. Yang terhormat Profesor Lindsay Oates, pembicara kita tadi. Thank you for welcome my country. Dan tentunya semua para wakil rektor yang hadir, para hadirin, para peserta yang saya hormati. Tentunya kita panjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Di hari yang cerah ini kita dipertemukan di forum yang sangat mulia ini dalam rangka untuk mendiskusikan banyak hal. Mudah-mudahan semua yang kita sampaikan, yang kita bicarakan, kita diskusikan ini diberkahi oleh Allah Subhanahu wa taala. Salam serta salam tak lupa kita haturkan kehadiran Nabi besar Muhammad SAW. Hadirin yang saya hormati, Budekan ini langsung translate atau? Ya, enggak, oh, oke. Okay. Para hadirin yang saya hormati, umat Islam Indonesia ini memiliki karakter keagamaan yang begitu khas. Ajaran Islam yang lahir dan tumbuh di tempat-tempat yang gersang, di tempat-tempat yang panas, atau di alam-alam yang karakter cuacanya panas, ini juga menumbuhkan sebuah ciri khas ajaran Islam yang membawa kepada sebuah pandangan-pandangan yang keras dan sebagainya. Nah, begitu juga Islam yang ada di Indonesia. Islam yang ada di Indonesia ini menunjukkan aspek fluiditas atau kecairan dan fleksibilitasnya. Setidaknya kita semua bisa membedakan corak Islam yang masuk ke daratan, misalnya di Pakistan, di Afrika, dengan Islam yang hadir atau Islam yang masuk ke daratan Nusantara ini. Hal demikian tidak dapat dipisahkan dari karakter asli warga sempat. Nah, kenapa Islam Indonesia ini bisa damai, bisa sejuk, bisa ramah? Karena memang karakter masyarakat Nusantara juga demikian. Karakter masyarakat Nusantara yang dikenal sopan, santun, menghargai, gotong royong dan sebagainya, inilah yang akhirnya menjadi sebuah adaptasi antara penyebaran ajaran Islam dengan budaya-budaya yang sudah tumbuh dan berkembang di Nusantara. Beberapa penelitian yang dilakukan oleh para ahli baik dalam maupun luar negeri menginformasikan keadaan yang demikian. Mark Woodward mengatakan dengan bukunya dalam Islam Jawa menginformasikan bahwa Islam yang berkembang di Jawa tidak ada kaitannya dengan agama-agama sebelumnya. Islam Jawa adalah Islam khas Jawa. Hal ini senada juga dikemukakan oleh Rickfield, seorang ahli sejarah Indonesia. Dia juga menulis tentang Islam Jawa. Dua buku ini tentu berbeda, sangat substansial dengan buku yang dibuat oleh Kripot Gods, the Religion of Java. Ada juga seorang filolog yaitu Nancy Florida dari Universitas Michigan dalam mengantar buku karya Azumadi Azra sempat menentang pandangan-pandangan tersebut yang menuduh bahwa atau mengatakan bahwa Islam di Indonesia itu adalah Islam sinkretis. Dengan basis kajian naskah perpustakaan di Keraton Solo dan Jogja, Nancy Florida menepis tuduhan bahwa para Indonesianis ini sebelumnya termasuk Kripot Gods maupun Senok Hargrens. Hadirin yang saya muliakan, apa yang saya sampaikan di atas ini akan ada kaitannya dengan yang berikut akan saya sampaikan. Di abad ke-15 atau sebelumnya, ketika kerajaan Majapahit berkuasa, sudah ada sebuah ajaran tentang kenegaraan yang dibuat oleh Empu Tantular dalam kitab Sutasoma, Kakawin Sutasoma, itu menggambarkan tentang keanekaragaman yang ada di Nusantara ini. Di mana Bhinneka Tunggal Ika yang ditulis oleh Empu Tantular ini menjadi refleksi dari keadaan atau situasi masyarakat Nusantara pada saat itu. Yang kebetulan juga Empu Tantular ini seorang ilmuwan, seorang pemikir di zamannya, tapi beliau beragama Buddha Tantrayana. Sedangkan Majapahit adalah penganut Hindu Siwa. Nah, pemikiran Bhinneka Tunggal Ika ini menggambarkan betapa sikap toleran, sikap moderat itu sudah coba dikembangkan di daratan Nusantara ini oleh para pendahulu-pendahulu kita. Dan Bhinneka Tunggal Ika inilah yang merefleksikan tentang kondisi masyarakat pada saat itu, baik di wilayah Majapahit secara langsung bagian dari kerajaan atau wilayah-wilayah menjadi bagian dari Majapahit, yang kita tahu kekuasaan Majapahit itu sampai kepada wilayah Campa dan seterusnya. Hadirin yang saya hormati, apa yang saya sampaikan tadi ini menjadi pengantar di atas. Islam di Indonesia dengan para ulama selaku pembawa ajarannya telah mampu melakukan penyesuaian ajaran sehingga pemeluk agama Islam di Nusantara ini mengalami perkembangan yang spektakuler atau sangat tinggi. Barangkali para peneliti belum banyak mengungkap dan bahkan masih menjadi misteri mengapa di abad ke-15 agama Islam dalam waktu singkat bisa berkembang secara cepat di wilayah Nusantara ini. Sementara para ahli sejarah sudah mencatat Islam mulai masuk ke Nusantara ini di abad ke-7 hingga abad ke-13. Namun tidak mengalami sebuah perkembangan yang signifikan. Hemat saya ini tidak bisa dipisahkan dari peran ulama dan penyebar agama yang mampu menunjukkan aspek wasatiyah atau moderat dalam penyebaran agama Islam di abad 15 tersebut. Bahwa spirit kemoderatan Islam saat ini ada empat indikator dari spirit moderat yang Kementerian Agama sedang kembangkan. Pertama adalah tentang toleransi. Yang kedua tentang komitmen kebangsaan kita. Ketiga anti kekerasan, dan keempat itu adalah tentang kemampuan untuk beradaptasi dengan nilai-nilai lokal. Nah, beradaptasi dengan nilai-nilai lokal inilah yang menjadi awal cikal bakal terciptanya atau terbentuknya Islam yang wasatiyah di Indonesia ini di abad ke-15 tadi. Di mana para penyebar-penyebar agama, para waliullah ini menyebarkan dengan menyesuaikan sebuah nilai-nilai lokal yang sudah ada di dalam masyarakat. Sedikit gambaran ilustrasi tadi disampaikan oleh Bu Dekan. Saya ini lahir di Jakarta. Saya kebetulan anak Betawi asli, Bu Dekan, Pak Rektor. kami di Betawi ini oleh orang tua kami tidak pernah disuruh sholat. Tidak pernah disuruh sholat. Dari saya kecil sampai saya akil balik, sampai saya besar, sampai orang tua saya meninggal, itu saya tidak pernah disuruh sholat. Kenapa Bapak Ibu sekalian? Karena di Betawi itu nggak ada sholat. Di Betawi itu adanya sembahyang. Di Betawi adanya sembahyang. Makanya dalam sinetron Sidul ada lagunya, aduh sialan, Sidul sembahyang mengaji. Bukan sholat mengaji, tapi sembahyang mengaji. Ini adalah bukti bagaimana adaptasi nilai-nilai lokal itu terjadi di masyarakat kita. Di Betawi yang wilayahnya mungkin kalau bicara penyebaran para waliullah, ada Sunan Gunung Jati di Cirebon. Dalam jarak yang begitu jauh, tapi nilai-nilai lokal sudah tertanam bagaimana para leluhur kita sudah menanamkan sebuah sikap moderat. Sembahyang itu oleh orang-orang Betawi itu dianggap sebagai kosakata yang sama untuk kata sholat. Mungkin di umat lain sembahyang juga menjadi ritual ibadah mereka. Orang Konghucu ketika beribadah mereka menyebutnya dengan sembahyang. Orang Hindu juga demikian, orang Buddha juga demikian. Nah pasti ini adalah sebuah persinggungan budaya yang terjadi ketika Islam mulai berkembang di tanah Betawi. Dan mungkin di tempat-tempat lain hal yang sama. Nah ini adalah bukti bagaimana moderasi, bagaimana sikap wasatiyah saat itu sudah dikembangkan oleh atau dilakukan oleh para pendahulu-pendahulu kita. Dari 4 indikator tersebut, dalam Kongres Ulama Internasional di Bogor yang dilaksanakan di tahun 2018, dari 4 indikator tadi ditambah lagi menjadi 9 indikator. Selain tadi, toleransi, komitmen kebangsaan, anti kekerasan, adaptasi terhadap nilai-nilai lokal, ditambah lagi dengan sifat islah, reformatif, adalah keadilan, syura, musyawarah, qudwah, tauladan, dan tawazun, berkeseimbangan. Jadi dalam Kongres Ulama Internasional, moderat dalam kacamata beragama itu jadi 9 indikator. Para ulama di abad 14-15 mampu menunjukkan sikap fluiditas atau mencair. Ajaran Islam ini dalam bahasa saat itu disebut dengan kata moderat. Keterbukaan informasi tentunya saat ini juga menjadi tantangan tersendiri. Dunia saat ini tanpa batas atau kita kenal dengan borderless menjadi ancaman tergerusnya sikap-sikap atau pandangan-pandangan moderat yang sebelumnya sudah menjadi bagian dari kehidupan masyarakat Indonesia. Makanya Kementerian Agama merasa perlu menyusun sebuah nomenklatur yang mampu mencerminkan spirit sebuah agama yang selanjutnya disebut dengan moderasi beragama. Secara singkat saya tadi menyampaikan bahwa moderasi beragama pada hakikatnya di Indonesia ini sudah terjadi. Sikap moderat itu adalah genetik asli orang Nusantara. Bagaimana emputan tular yang Buddha Tantrayana, sementara rajanya Rajasa adalah yang Hindu Siwa, ini mampu menjalankan sebuah pemerintahan. Dan Majapahit adalah kerajaan Nusantara yang pernah berjaya dan kekuasaannya melebihi wilayah Nusantara ini. Jadi saya katakan bahwa genetik orang Indonesia itu moderat. Genetik orang Indonesia itu moderat. Hari ini karena tidak ada lagi batas-batas yang dapat kita lakukan terhadap perkembangan informasi maupun hal-hal lain, maka moderasi beragama ini perlu digelorakan kembali. Perlu dibuat sebuah nomenklatur tersendiri. Karena apa? Di sisi lain ancaman-ancaman terhadap moderasi beragama ini juga mulai tumbuh dan berkembang di Nusantara ini. Dalam beberapa dekade terakhir kita sering melihat dan menyaksikan bagaimana kekerasan atas nama agama ini terjadi di wilayah kita. Tidak hanya kekerasan verbal, tapi sudah pada kekerasan fisik, bahkan pembunuhan dengan melakukan bom bunuh diri dan seterusnya. Ini adalah sebuah hal yang nyata yang terjadi di sekitar kita, yang tentunya kita mempunyai kewajiban yang sama dan mempunyai kewajiban yang memanggil kita untuk meluruskan kembali tentang sikap beragama kita. Hadirin yang saya hormati, yang berbahagia, belakangan ini memang moderasi beragama terkesan menjadi istilah elitis dan akademis. Yang menjadi tantangan kita hari ini adalah moderasi beragama ini masih sangat elitis dan sangat akademis. Tidak banyak yang memahami istilah tersebut dalam penjelasan-penjelasan yang ada. Bahkan di bawah, di masyarakat, seolah-olah moderasi beragama itu menjadi moderasi agama. Moderasi yang coba mencampur adukan agama. Yang kita moderasikan adalah cara beragama. Bukan agamanya yang kita moderasikan, tapi cara beragama kita yang kita moderasikan. Nah, ini perlu etos yang keras dari kita semua agar ancaman-ancaman atau diskursus-diskursus yang terjadi di luar sana ini bisa menjadi peimbang dari kegiatan-kegiatan kita, contohnya pada hari ini. Kalau kita buka YouTube, kalau kita buka atau medsos yang lain, ketika kita cari tentang moderasi beragama, itu lebih banyak pemahaman-pemahaman yang tidak tepat terhadap konsep moderasi beragama yang sedang kita kembangkan. Pada kesempatan ini tentunya menjadi sangat penting dalam memahami makna dan maksud moderasi beragama yang sedang Kementerian Agama ini lakukan. Ada 7 program prioritas Kementerian Agama, salah satu program prioritas tersebut adalah moderasi beragama. Sementara kita tahu moderasi beragama ini adalah sejarah dari bangsa kita yang pada hakikatnya bukan hal yang baru. Hal yang sudah dipraktekkan tapi ingin kita terus jaga, ingin kita terus pelihara menjadi bagian yang sudah final bagi negara kita, di mana Allah Subhanahu wa taala menciptakan Indonesia ini dengan berbagai macam latar belakang. Ini tentu menjadi juga hal yang melandasi tentang moderasi beragama tadi. Moderasi beragama adalah antitesis atas kekhawatiran perkembangan diskursus keagamaan ekstrim di tengah masyarakat selama dasawarsa terakhir ini. Diskursus tersebut memiliki relevansi dengan maraknya aksi ekstremisme berbasis agama dan berujung pada kekerasan dalam kurun waktu kurang lebih 20 tahun terakhir ini. Ada tiga bagian atau 3 kelompok yang harus kita waspadai atau menjadi bagian yang harus kita diskusikan. Pertama adalah ini terkait dengan kemajuan teknologi dan kemajuan komunikasi yang tidak bisa kita batasi, yaitu mulai masuknya ideologi transnasional. Ideologi transnasional. Ideologi transnasional yang mencoba membuat purinisasi terhadap ajaran-ajaran agama yang sudah kita yakini dan diajarkan oleh orang-orang tua kita, guru-guru kita, kiai-kiai kita, dan ulama-ulama kita. Ideologi transnasional ini mencoba membuat sebuah definisi lagi tentang bagaimana beragama yang menurut mereka benar. Dan yang lebih memprihatinkan lagi, ideologi transnasional ini mempunyai tujuan-tujuan politik tertentu dalam mengembangkan dan dalam membuat ideologi ini diyakini oleh masyarakat Indonesia. Saya sebut contoh umpamanya yang sudah dibubarkan oleh Presiden Republik Indonesia adalah Hizbut Tahrir. Hizbut Tahrir ini adalah ideologi transnasional. Mereka mengemas gerakannya di Indonesia ini dengan gerakan dakwah. Tapi di sisi dalam dari gerakan dakwah ini ada gerakan politik yang mencoba mengganti sistem bernegara kita, sistem bermuamalah kita dan lain sebagainya. Hizbut Tahrir di negara-negara aslinya atau di negara asalnya atau di Timur Tengah ini sudah dianggap sebagai organisasi terlarang. Bahkan di beberapa negara Hizbut Tahrir ini sempat melakukan kudeta terhadap pemerintahan yang sah. Jadi gerakan dakwah mengawali gerakan mereka, tetapi ketika mereka sudah kuat, sudah solid, maka mereka tidak segan-segan untuk melakukan pengambil alihan kekuasaan. Walaupun di beberapa negara ini mereka mengalami kegagalan. Dan ini sempat masuk ke Indonesia. Ini adalah kelompok pertama, itu adalah kelompok ideologi transnasional. Yang kedua, ini adalah kaum-kaum atau kelompok-kelompok eksklusif yang mungkin kalau hari ini lagi ditren dengan kelompok-kelompok hijrah dan sebagainya. Mereka yang mencoba untuk melakukan pembenahan diri. Mungkin kalau umurnya mungkin seperti saya 53 tahun umpamanya, 53 tahun, tapi selama 45 tahun mereka terbenam dalam dunia gelap atau apa kita sebut dengan pergaulan-pergaulan yang jauh dari agama lah. Jauh dari agama. Memasuki usia 50 mereka mulai sadar dan mereka mulai untuk memperbaiki diri. Nah sayangnya ketika mereka sedang ingin memperbaiki diri dan mencoba untuk menjadi lebih baik sebagai manusia, mereka mengambil sebuah referensi keagamaan yang tidak sama dengan apa yang sedang kita diskusikan ini. Mereka lebih banyak kepada kelompok-kelompok tertentu yang memang mereka sudah eksklusif. Dan akhirnya untuk menembus 45 tahun kesalahannya, untuk menjadi orang yang sangat alim, orang yang sangat soleh, orang yang sangat beragama, akhirnya beragamanya menjadi hitam putih. Beragamanya benar dengan salah. Tidak mencoba untuk mencari sebuah perbandingan atau yang selama ini kita lakukan. Karena mereka ingin totalitas untuk menebus kesalahan 45 tahun dengan waktu 1 tahun 2 tahun. Jadi semuanya akhirnya terakumulasi dalam waktu yang singkat sehingga perbedaan-perbedaan itu menjadi sebuah nilai-nilai yang absolut buat mereka. Ketika tidak sama dengan kelompok mereka, maka dikatakan kelompok lain itu adalah kelompok yang salah. Bahkan mereka bisa memfatwakan, mereka bisa memvonis orang lain kafir dan lain sebagainya. Nah ini terkait dengan kelompok yang ketiga, yaitu kelompok penganut klaim kebenaran tunggal. Klaim kebenaran tunggal inilah yang melahirkan gerakan-gerakan ekstremisme dan terorisme. Ekstremisme dan terorisme ini adalah sebuah, kalau kita ibaratkan saudara-saudara sekalian yang saya hormati, kelompok ini seperti gunung berapi yang ada di dalam lautan. Kalau kita umpamakan Gunung Krakatau yang ada di Selat Sunda, Gunung Krakatau ini gunung berapi. Tapi yang kita lihat hanya puncaknya saja. Kita lihat hanya puncaknya karena perut gunung berapi ini dan punggung gunung berapi ini terbenam di dasar laut. Terbenam di laut. Yang kita lihat hanyalah puncaknya. Puncak inilah yang kita lihat sebagai sebuah letusan kaum-kaum ekstremis dan kaum-kaum teroris tadi. Sementara yang terkandung di dalam perut gunung berapi ini adalah kelompok-kelompok radikal, kelompok-kelompok klaim kebenaran tunggal yang sewaktu-waktu ketika kita ketika kita lengah atau kita tidak peduli lagi dengan kehidupan beragama kita, sewaktu-waktu isi perut gunung berapi ini bisa meledak dan memuntahkan laharnya yang akan menghantam siapa saja yang ada di sana, termasuk kita-kita yang ada di sini. Mungkin kita-kita akan menjadi bagian yang akan dihanguskan, akan diterjang oleh lahar tersebut. Jadi puncaknya itu ya kelompok teroris yang kita lihat hanya kecil. Itulah yang mereka sudah melakukan aktivitas secara terbuka. Tetapi yang tertutup itu sangat banyak dan ini mempunyai potensi yang sangat besar untuk menghancurkan siapa saja ketika kita lengah, ketika kita tidak mampu merawat dan menjaga nilai-nilai moderasi dalam beragama ini. Hadirin yang berbahagia, tentunya terlepas dari berbagai kritik atas konsep moderasi beragama ini, namun yang membahagiakan adalah umat beragama Indonesia. Moderasi beragama telah menjadi amanat penting dan dituangkan dalam dokumen resmi negara, yaitu melalui Peraturan Presiden Nomor 18 Tahun 2020 tentang RPJMN 2020-2024 dan akan tetap dilanjutkan hingga tahun 2035. Bahkan di awal tahun 2023 yang lalu sudah terbit Perpres yang baru 58 tahun 2023 tentang penguatan moderasi beragama. Dengan sekbernya adalah Kementerian Agama, melibatkan beberapa kementerian dan lembaga negara lainnya. Berdasarkan Perpres ini, Kementerian Agama menjadi leading sektor dalam kehidupan moderasi beragama. Hadirin yang berbahagia, untuk mempertahankan orisinalitas ajaran agama, ajaran Islam khas Indonesia ini yang begitu cair, spirit moderasi beragama harus dikuatkan kembali dan dijalankan serta dipraktekkan di tengah masyarakat. Di sisi lain, ada kelompok-kelompok lain yang mencoba menggerus, maka sudah menjadi kewajiban kita untuk terus menumbuh kembangkan dan menjaga globalisasi terhadap ajaran moderasi beragama ini. Jalur yang paling strategis adalah tentu melalui pendidikan. Pemahaman tentang moderasi beragama, jalur yang paling strategis adalah melalui pendidikan. Hampir 25% penduduk Indonesia ini adalah masih pelajar dan mahasiswa. Dan merekalah yang akan menjadi penerima tongkat estafet keberlangsungan bangsa dan negara ini. Yang akan menjadi embrio-embrio pemimpin-pemimpin di masa yang akan datang. Bisa jadi di antara 25% pelajar dan mahasiswa ini yang kedepannya ini akan menjadi anggota legislatif, menjadi anggota eksekutif, yudikatif, bahkan bisa menjadi presiden dan lain sebagainya. Atau menjadi tokoh-tokoh masyarakat yang akan mempengaruhi kehidupan sosial. Kita semua harus merasa berkepentingan untuk melekatkan nilai-nilai mulia ini pada jiwa putra-putri Indonesia yang saat ini sedang menjalani pendidikannya. Mengingat beban materi pendidikan di sekolah madrasah ataupun mata kuliah di perguruan tinggi ini sudah cukup banyak dan padat, maka untuk diseminasi penguatan moderasi beragama perlu dirumuskan secara bijak dan strategis. Jangan sampai penguatan moderasi beragama ini justru menambah bobot beban materi-materi yang akhirnya membuat mereka menjadi jenuh dan seterusnya. Beberapa hal yang perlu dicermati dan memiliki relevansi dengan Fakultas Ilmu Pendidikan tentunya adalah sebagai berikut. Pertama, moderasi beragama tidak perlu dijadikan mata pelajaran tersendiri. Jadi moderasi beragama tidak perlu menjadi mata pelajaran tersendiri. Jadikan spirit muatannya sudah terintegrasi di dalam semua mata pelajaran yang diajarkan. Terutama pada rumpun mata pelajaran kuliah dirasah Islamiyah yang meliputi Al-Quran dan Hadis, fikih, akidah, akhlak, dan ataupun tasawuf, dan sejarah kebudayaan Islam. Ini yang disebut dengan insersi, penyisipan, paham-paham atau muatan moderasi beragama di setiap materi-materi dengan relevansi yang kita lakukan. Implementasinya lebih ditekankan pada aspek bagaimana substansi tersebut dikaitkan dengan spirit moderasi dan dapat diterapkan di dalam kehidupan sehari-hari. Tentunya dibutuhkan usaha yang lebih serius untuk mendiskusikannya, menggodoknya, mengaplikasikannya, dan tentu memberikan contoh yang terpenting adalah memberikan tauladan buat mereka. Yang kedua, mengoptimalkan pendekatan pembelajaran yang mampu melahirkan karakter atau tradisi berpikir kritis, bersikap menghargai perbedaan, menghargai pendapat orang lain, toleran, demokratis, berani menyampaikan gagasan-gagasan sportif, menginspirasi dan bertanggung jawab. Tentunya hal ini adalah masih kelanjutan dari strategi atau hal yang pertama yang tadi saya sampaikan. Yang berikutnya, senada dengan era kurikulum merdeka yang dikeluarkan oleh Kemendikbud, perlu ditekankan budaya tradisi belajar secara tuntas. Tradisi belajar secara tuntas. Yang tadi yang saya sampaikan, kelompok-kelompok eksklusif ini belajar agamanya belum tuntas. Baru satu dia belajar agama, tapi karena ingin membalas masa kelam mereka, akhirnya totalitas pada satu pemahaman inilah yang menjauhkan mereka dengan ikatan-ikatan sosial yang ada. Jadi belajar secara tuntas di setiap kajian atau pembelajaran subjek apapun adalah tidak penting peserta didik menguasai banyak materi atau subjek matter, karena tradisi belajar tuntas dan mendalam akan melahirkan para peserta didik yang berkarakter pembelajar. Salah satu dunia pendidikan dan ini adalah dunia pendidikan entitas pendidikan yang asli di Indonesia, itu adalah pondok pesantren. Pondok pesantren sebenarnya adalah sebuah wadah yang memberikan kesempatan untuk mempelajari, menguasai dan memahami pemahaman-pemahaman baik ilmu-ilmu agama dan ilmu lainnya itu secara tuntas. Dan ini mungkin menjadi role model yang bisa kita padukan. Yang terakhir, yang keempat, menyelenggarakan program pendidikan, pelatihan, dan pembekalan tertentu dengan tema khusus tentang penguatan moderasi beragama. Tentunya yang terakhir ini baru bisa kita lakukan jika dukungan, anggaran, dan kemauan dari para pengambil kebijakan ini mempunyai frekuensi yang sama dengan kita. Karena ini membutuhkan penganggaran yang sangat besar untuk mewujudkan sebuah program pendidikan, pelatihan, dan pelajaran pembekalan yang khusus tentang penguatan moderasi beragama. Nah, kita berharap program-program yang sudah dibuat oleh Bapak Menteri Agama dengan 7 program prioritas di Kementerian Agama, dari mulai moderasi beragama, KUA, revitalisasi KUA, ada lagi digitalisasi, dan lain sebagainya. Ini sudah menjadi program-program yang hari ini di Kementerian Agama ini sudah menjadi sebuah lompatan yang sangat jauh di Kementerian Agama. Tentu legasi yang ingin kita tinggalkan di kemudian hari ini adalah bagaimana kehidupan moderasi beragama ini dapat ditopang dan didukung oleh kebijakan-kebijakan yang lebih memihak lagi dengan tentunya penganggaran-penganggaran yang lebih besar lagi. Para hadirin yang terhormat, para guru besar, para rektor, para wakil rektor, dekan dan sebagainya, tentunya mendiskusikan tentang moderasi beragama ini adalah sesuatu yang perlu terus kita galakan, terus kita gelorakan agar semangat moderasi beragama yang menjadi bagian yang tidak terpisah dari genetik kita ini tetap hidup dalam diri kita dan tentunya mengalir kepada anak-anak kita dan cucu-cucu kita, sehingga Indonesia yang terlahir secara beragam, Indonesia yang terlahir secara heterogen, ini tetap terjaga oleh anak cucu kita karena mempunyai genetik-genetik yang sama dengan kita, yaitu memaknai bahwa dalam kehidupan beragama kita harus mengambil jalan tengah dan berkeseimbangan terhadap perbedaan-perbedaan yang ada. Perbedaan bukan ditarik menjadi sebuah pertentangan, tapi lewat perbedaan itu kita dapat memahami orang lain. Lewat dari perbedaan itu kita dapat menghargai orang lain. Dan lewat perbedaan itu pula lah kita diikat menjadi satu persatuan dan kesatuan dalam negara kesatuan Republik Indonesia. Hadirin yang berbahagia, demikian yang dapat saya sampaikan. Mohon maaf kalau ada kekurangan dan kehilapan yang dapat saya sampaikan pada hari ini. Mudah-mudahan forum ini mampu menghasilkan sebuah pemikiran-pemikiran yang lebih tajam lagi, dan tentunya kita berharap dari para kaum-kaum terdidik inilah moderasi beragama tidak hanya dipelajari, tapi Bapak Ibu sekalian menjadi duta-duta moderasi beragama dimanapun Bapak Ibu beraktivitas. Demikian, terima kasih. Wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah wa ridha wal inayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Wamen, silakan duduk. Kita tidak akan membuka tanya jawab karena sudah 10 menit lewat dari schedule. Tapi because our audience is not only Indonesian, I would just like to briefly summarize what he has his speech. So like in his title of speech that education is an effective media in disseminating moderate values. So his main message is that moderate Islam is the nature of Indonesian Islam itself. So he actually admires the previous ulama who has spread Islam in Indonesia in a fluid way, contextually adjusting to Indonesian local culture, which he argues to be moderate. Yeah, and because his argument is to suggest that education is media to disseminate moderate religious moderation. So he has 4 recommendations to do so. The first one is that religious moderation shouldn't be an independent subject, but should be integrated into many subjects. Mau memberitahu Pak Wamen di Triple IU ini justru Islam Wasatiyah itu menjadi mata kuliah wajib untuk MA dan PhD wajib gitu ya. Karena itu adalah misi dari Kementerian Agama sehingga kita mewajibkan semua untuk tahu ini gitu ya. Walaupun kita juga mengintegrasikannya ke banyak mata kuliah seperti misalnya kalau di Fakultas Education itu kan ada education in a pluralistic society, education in society. Jadi di situ kita integrasikan moderasi beragama dalam mata kuliah juga seperti yang disarankan oleh Pak Wamen. And the second suggestion is that optimizing teaching and learning approach which cultivate character or traditions of critical thinking, appreciating differences, respecting others' opinion, tolerance, democracy, expressing ideas, and this is followed by the third suggestion about mastery learnings. He says that learning, we don't need to learn like so many subjects, but the important thing is that we master the subject that we learn. And last but not least is organizing education trainings which strengthen religious moderations, but this needs funding, yeah. I think that's all my quick summary of the speech, which is actually quite long, but because most of the audience are Indonesian, so I don't need to repeat it. So I would like to close the morning sessions by reading Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Terima kasih Pak Wamen. ada token of appreciation dan nanti disampaikan oleh Pak Rektor. Setelah itu kita akan makan siang bersama. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you. We would like to ask Kiai Haji Saifur Rahmat Dasuki MSc and Professor Dina Nurmila to stay on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as we extend our gratitude to our esteemed keynote speakers, we would like to invite the Rector of Universitas Islam International Indonesia, Professor Jamhari, to present the special package to our distinguished guests. Once again, let's give a warm round of applause to our keynote speakers, Kiai Haji Saifur Rahmat Dasuki, MSc, for his invaluable contributions and insight.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have completed the first sessions of our agenda today, and the next agenda is lunch and prayer break. We would like to inform all the audience that we will have a parallel sessions at the lectures hall and the teleconference room at the Faculty A building, and make sure you don't skip the sessions. And after the parallel sessions, don't forget to join the gala dinner and networking event at 3:45 p.m. at the Rectorate building. And be mindful, we will also announce the best paper for this conference. We'll see you at the Rectoral building.
And we would like to remind you that we still have day 2 of our conference tomorrow. And we will have Professor Vina Andriani from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia as the keynote speakers. We appreciate your presence and attention. Thank you very much. We will see you in the next agenda. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.